these loans can still assume contingent liability status. In the event of a default, the government will be forced to pay. So the government needs to ensure that this is monitored to ensure that these two institutions do not default on their loans, or else it would increase the overall debt obligations of the central government, and which it can't afford in light of the ongoing tight fiscal space. Then there we also bring out the fact that the external nature of this debt will also add to foreign currency obligations. So given Zambia's history of external debt challenges, including the current Eurobond repayments and the reduced foreign exchange reserves, servicing these loans could place additional strain on reserves, especially if the kwacha depreciates further. Then lastly there we bring out the fact that another implication which will be positive if this is executed well is that if managed effectively, these borrowings could positively impact Zambia's economic growth and lead to improved access to affordable housing and SME financing. So, Honorable Chair, this is where we end our submission, and our emphasis in having analyzed these two borrowings by these institutions is that the government and the National Assembly, in providing oversight, needs to ensure that the risk of default is minimized or avoided to avoid this crystallizing into contingent liabilities which will fall upon the government. And in this regard, we end our submission. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Honorable members, you have followed the submission by the Parliamentary Budgets Office. Questions? Everyone has a question here. I think let's take the 4 questions. I don't know the one online. Has he maybe put his... We start with Honorable Mavumba, then just like that. I think we give you the questions, then you can answer those 4, then you come back again. Honorable Mavumba.
Okay, Chair. For me, Director Kadesh is maybe on page, where the capital adequacy for ZICBC, it dropped from, is it 81% to, which page is that, colleagues? Capital adequacy, page, okay, on page 7, the debt to equity ratio, leverage and financial stability on page 7, this should be Zambia National Building Society audited financial statements. Now, if their debt to equity ratio is in 2023 it was 1.8, maybe what I would want to find out, what is the industry standard, and if it is at 1.8 in 2023, and if they got is it $35 million, to what extent is that $35 million going to have an impact on this debt to equity ratio? Then again, maybe probably what we needed from yourselves on page 8, if you look at ZICB's capital adequacy falling from 81 in 2021 to 41% in 2023, what could be the reason for this falling of their capital adequacy? And if they were to borrow the $30 million they are proposing, what impact is it going to have on this capital adequacy? I submit, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Sumunji.
Thank you, Chair. For me, my question is on the Industrial Commercial Bank, which was established in 2018, and the break-even, they just broke even just recently. In addition, they have absorbed Invest Trust. For me, Invest Trust is under liquidation, meaning there are some depositors who are likely to move in and withdraw their money, putting the bank under more stress. So this, being a bank which is owned by government, I feel it's more risky that we can, one, get a bank which is not doing very well, lump it into industrial relations bank. Then from there, you borrow money from the international market, put it under the same bank. Are we not doing are we not doing like we did with the DBZ, where the government borrowed money, took it to DBZ. DBZ lent the money to borrowers, and then the DBZ is put under liquidation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable. Honorable Mumba.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you very much, Budget Office. Mine, before I ask my question, is just a comment on the parastatal companies. Why is government, in your opinion, still holding on to these companies? I know that Building Society is one of the companies that has been profitable, and I don't know how they manage, because their profitability post-COVID has been quite interesting, because their business is housing. So I don't know how, could it be the support they're getting through CDF? You know, something that can be talked about, because that's where the bulk of CDF money seems to be going, in terms of empowerment, grants and everything. These borrowings will end up being on the loan books of the government, or on the loan books of our people. Would I be wrong to assume it that way? Because if the reason why we're discussing this, we're like a board for these two companies. That's the reason we're discussing. We're discussing their financial viability to borrow money. And the only reason we're discussing this for them to borrow money, is they want to get authority from the People's Parliament. Okay? So in short, they themselves, they can even go in the market as a business. But the only problem is that they're 100% owned by government. So that's why you were talking about that contingent liability, because then it will become a government debt in the event that they don't perform. Okay. Now, for me, what I'm trying to find out from you is, these ones which are viable, like Building Society, why don't they get partially privatized? The way we have seen Zanaco, 49%, 51%. The way we have seen Indobank, similar, I think 49, 51. Why can't the recommendation be that they partially get privatized? So that the ones that are not doing well, the two, even when we talk about, say, the industrial bank, there are two government programs which can allow them to sit on a lot of money if government just decided. One, the credit scheme, the credit scheme of 850 million that the government is increasing. That's one, to support SMEs, to support agriculture. Two, there is also, I think you mentioned, that the other thing that Zambia Building Society, Zambia Credit will be doing will be to support SMEs. It can easily manage the resources from CEC, the resources from Ministry of SME. It can sit on those portfolios. So why does it need to really borrow the money? These are just my thoughts, not a question.
Thank you very much. Very thought-provoking thoughts. Honorable.
Thank you, Chair. Director, I want because this is one big issue that I see will pose a challenge to these public bodies, these institutions that we own as government, because if we borrow $30 million, just as an example, $30 million, today the rate is 26 point something. By the time we'll be paying, if it's 35 or if it increases by half, it means that that borrowing in effect has gone to from 30 to 30 times 1.5, which is $45 million. You have talked about the need for these two institutions to hedge these borrowings. What best hedging instruments do you think these two institutions can use? Because I've noticed most of the government borrowings that we have engaged in, there is none that I can say has been successfully been hedged. So what hedging methods or instruments do you think may be available to be used by these two institutions, financial institutions? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kateshi. Maybe I can also add one or two. The other one would be something like a proposal. Then the other one is a worry which I have of where we are taking our country and our children's children. Mr. Kateshi, the comment that I have is that housing at the moment, yes, it is a challenge. However, you'll find that there are private institutions such as maybe Minwood Estates, we have Horizon, we have Kwashe, we have all these, they already have even land in maybe what I would call modern places. They have offered to say that they want to offer cheaper accommodation according. However, they are going to borrow this money in US dollars. NAPSA had borrowed. There were houses which were somewhere at SOS here, and even in Kalulush. There was a huge, estate. Those houses had to be offloaded at a much cheaper price because grass started growing even inside the homes. What is it that Zambia Building Society is going to do different, especially that the borrowing is in forex, and immediately you borrow the following day, the price would have gone very high? For me, with what I have noticed, if it was within my power, I would automatically say no. If they are making profit, why aren't they doing, buying off? If they have the land, why can't they look at advertising the particular land so that some, even us or even other members of the public, can be able to buy at maybe terms? They pay 3 months, they pay 1 year, they mortgage you immediately you come to parliament, then at the end you can go out with a home. Why do we have to put pressure on our finances which are already under pressure? Because I know this one, anyway, I don't want to say I'm a prophet of doom, might be a bad debt anyway. So that is what I would want to find out about the building society. Talking about ZICB, it should have even taken maybe about 5 years before we hear about them coming back. Just now, they have taken over a bank. This insatiable appetite now, they want the government to be the backup for them to run the bank. I mean, didn't we evaluate this company to say it is able to sustain and it can be able to run the... And you see, banks are quite very tricky institutions to which we can say our people should be able to back up. However, you are the ones who are doing the macroeconomics and everything. Maybe you can comment on those two things. I submit. On the rest, before we can get to the next question.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Probably before Mr. Fiu can take on the serious numbers on capital adequacy ratios and what, I'll ask Mr. Ngoma to just give a small background to ZICB. He was with industrial credit. He was with industrial development IDC, and he's very familiar with this transaction and where it is. Then I will comment on the others.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. I served as chairperson for the Audit and Risk Management Committee of the Industrial Development Corporation, and I sat on what was called the Investment Committee, where we had the governor and other key players in the economy. So when ZICB was set up, it came out of a takeover of the assets, particularly the loan book of the then defunct Intermarket Discount House. You remember very well. Yeah. So this is an entity that was created to salvage the issues pertaining to the winding up of business of Intermarket Discount House. And the Minister of Finance, who are now who were then the majority shareholders, saw it fit that we salvage that and create a bank to carry on the business, but at the same time protect depositors' interest. So it started off as a project that was meant to attract investors onwards, but then it was retained on the books of the government through IDC as a subsidiary. For some of us, we propose that we get other investors to come in so that we can wane it off from the treasury. As you know, we're trying to clean up most of the SOEs so that they can become commercially viable and wane them off from treasury grants and subsidizing. So what transpired then was that NAPSA was invited to participate as a shareholder, and Workers' Compensation Fund came on board also. There were others as well who were then significant depositors like Madison, Financial Services, as well as other smaller ones. But over time, there was a restructuring, and the minority shareholders who were existing then, they ended up falling off, and then the prominent ones like NAPSA, and then followed by Workers' Compensation Fund took center stage. But the whole idea was that we get private capital to come in so that the government does not remain in the business of being a financial sector player as well. But IDC, being a holder of national assets for commercial returns, was there as the sole holder of that interest on behalf of the state. so that as the process went on, they could ultimately get some other investors to come in. So what happened later on, because Invest Trust Bank also, as you know, was partly owned by government. And there was a time that Invest Trust Bank, which was essentially a private bank, had some problems, and government moved in to also secure depositors' interest, but also to mitigate its collapse. And that's how ZCCM-IH also invested into Invest Trust Bank. And it was also brought into the IDC group as an investee company. Investee companies are those where the state through IDC has got a shareholding, but not fully owning the 100%. So government is a participant in the equity of the entity. So subsequently, the interest with Invest Trust Bank was also to ensure that that which government had put in could be shelved off and secured. But the challenge that we have also is that, you know, the financial sector in Zambia is still a bit fragile because of the shocks that we have experienced over time. So we need a lot of risk mitigation and to ensure that we do not fall into a situation where the banks start collapsing like what we've seen. We need a lot more capital because much as the appetite is there, but there is constraint on how much capital we can attract. And for the state to get involved in all these entities, it constitutes a contingent liability on the treasury. And what it means ultimately is that we have to provide even sovereign guarantees in most of these situations, which now is very difficult in terms of what is going on with the arrangements under the IMF and World Bank support. So what I would say is that with what is happening now, there are some issues that have to be considered, and going forward it would be best that government gets out of the business of running certain businesses. They leave that to the private sector. But entities like Workers' Compensation Fund, NAPSA, who have the appetite and they also have the capital to invest, they can do that, but that is premised on their investment guidelines. They should not be swayed by the state to invest. That is not the role of government to do that. They should act independently based on the board sanction through their investment committees that this is commercially viable investment that is going to give them the return on the investment, because they are investing pensioners' money, that is public money. In other countries they have got very stringent rules pertaining the governing of pension funds. So, Honorable Chair, I think I just wanted to give that background, but suffice to say that there are issues. So, since ZICB came into being, they have been short of capital. That is the truth. And there was a time that we are proposing that 3 banks merge: ZICB, Invest Trust Bank, and NATSEV, because they are small banks which were not major players in the market, and they are being suffocated by the big banks. So they are starved of capital, and also because of the sovereign alignment, they had no recourse to private capital, because private investors are not comfortable to co-invest with government, especially in the financial sector. So we went for that, and we even went a step further to approach government's partner in Indo-Zambia Bank, the Bank of Baroda, to come in and try and absorb this also to be part of the Indo-Zambia flagship. But they refused bluntly. They said they had no appetite for that, they were not willing, so that dropped off. Even I know that even Rabobank for Zanaco, so they were not keen to do that. So I think these are issues that were associated with the risk posed by the sovereign alignment, and because of some legacy issues that have been there. But going forward, essentially these banks should be able to go according to what Honorable had said, that we should be able to get these banks to go out in their own right to the markets and attract capital. That is the best way. They can float themselves, they can do corporate bonds, they can find, there are various mechanisms in which they can do that. The issues are that, one, there has to be good management, sound management, diligence on loan management, because the funds that they are getting, they are for onward lending. And this market also does not have any hedging instruments. So the risk posed from exchange exposure is very high, because these are foreign denominated facilities. So they need to ensure that they have sound management and ethical practices. And for the mortgage, it's the structuring and pricing. I'm glad that, Honorable Chair, you brought up the issues that we've seen around the investments of the likes of NAPSA in the housing estates in Kalurushi, here in Mbayanga, and so forth. Those were a mess. And a lot of money has actually just gone under. And we must learn lessons from that and be very careful, because mortgage pricing is a tricky one, and it's usually long term, like 25 years. That's when it makes sense. But you need deep money, deep pockets. So you go to development financial institutions that can give you, like under the IDEA window, long funding. Under the IDA window, you can get long structured funding at concessional rates. Then it becomes very sensible. So those are some of the issues that we have to look at and ensure that we are cautious, because evidence shows that we have been very poor in managing these financial institutions, and the likelihood of failure is very evident before us. I'm a banker originally, and I've been in the banking practice as a director and served in various ways, and I know the risks that are there, and I've seen where the foreign banks have done very well. Most of the big foreign banks actually controlled externally, not internally. So there are things that we need to take care of and be cautious that we do not expose the state to some of the risks that may come to haunt us as time goes on. I submit.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kadesh.
Yes, Chair. I'll continue on the SOEs. There was a question posed, why hold on to them, particularly those that may be doing well or may not be. Zambia has got, we've got a number of models within our country, which is very interesting situation. Probably we need to do more work as technical units of institutions like here, so that we give. We see a situation where, indeed, certain companies where the state has a minority shareholding, for example, Indo-Zambia, Zanaco, they perform very well. It's a model that has seems to be working. However, we seem also to have some interesting 100% owned institutions by the state, which are also doing a little bit seemingly well, like Honorable Mumba mentioned, Zambia National Commercial Bank, National Building Society itself. Then we have institutions like ZICAS. You know, ZICAS is also a government institution, okay? But it's not an institution that you see coming to the government or the treasury seeking for money. So these are within the government system as well. Of course, we have others that it's very difficult to really tell how they are operating. Those that are 100% owned by departments or ministries in the government. We also have this kind of institutions, but some of them have been limping for a long time. For example, Mulungushi, which is 100%, under the Ministry of Defense. We have other companies that are owned by ministries. For example, Zam Capital. These are government institutions, government companies, but run by individual ministries. Now we have big milling companies that have come up under the Correctional Service. We have also under ZN. These are enterprises now. But so we have all these models that are within the government. So I think we just need a bit of more work to see how they are operating. But the one that has proved like more viable is where the government has got limited holding, and they've let them do like Zanaco, Zambia, including the one where ZNBC has shareholding in Mount Choice. Because most people don't realize that Mount Choice is also partly owned by ZNBC. But it's also a company that does very well. So we've all got these models to learn from, even within, without even going outside the country. But I think one of the issues that where we've struggled with is the sentimental value that we attach to these companies, such that even when it's loss making, you fail to let it go. You would rather stay with it like you know, there's just this thing of wanting to still own it. But it's something that is a drain on the public resources. But it's a very interesting observation that we need to start moving in that direction. But at the same time, we need to get also to a point where this should be seen as businesses where government can invest and divest at any time, depending on the situation. If the situation is favorable, the government can increase its shareholding. If it's not favorable, there should be no harm in letting go and let the private sector run them more efficiently. But there's this sentimental value which is very difficult and deep-rooted to deal with. Then on hedging the risk against now this is a catch-22 situation, honorable members. Catch-22 in the sense that it brings in the issue that I think it was early this year, the dollarization versus de-dollarization issue. You see? Because ideally, one of the ways in which you would easily safeguard yourself is to link your word with the dollar at any time. But that is a government institution. It can't be at the forefront of doing exactly what against the policy direction. So now this becomes really a very tricky arrangement, particularly that history has it on our inability to maintain a stable exchange rate. That has been, I think, one of the biggest challenges that Zambia has grappled with from either UNIP days up to this time. So it's a very tricky, but maybe Mr. Mwinga can will highlight more on if there are any hedging mechanisms beyond that. Then there's the issue of the housing schemes that we've seen where people, private persons subdivide their land or acquire some pieces of land, then they try to develop some housing estates. I think the most challenge with the biggest challenge with the model that I've noticed is that the financing of the individual units by people, they still depend on either the bank. Somebody has to get a loan from the bank, from a building society or something like that. So they are still linked to a financial institution. Now, this is where institutions like ZN, Zambia National Building Society become a little, because of their slightly favorable interest rates compared to what one would get if they were to go to these short-term lenders, which have very difficult interest rates. And I think it has even landed most of people who have gone through those schemes in a bit of a challenge. Because if I go to Miniwood, I purchase, I get a facility from one of these microfinance institutions that we have, which have got very serious, exceptional high interest rates, just to service for the mere plot, and then I haven't even started building. By the time you get to building, you're already in financial stress. So it becomes an answer. But the problem that is there is they are still linked to financial institutions. So this arrangement may somehow be still work out for Zambia National Building Society, but taking into account the other risks, potential risks that have been highlighted, the exchange rate risk as being one major factor. But I'll also give the chance to my colleague, Mr. Mwinga, to also highlight a few issues on the capital adequacy requirements and also the debt to equity ratios. I think that we are mentioned.
Thank you, Chair. I'll touch on a few of the questions. I'll start with the one by Honorable Simunji on the risk of us falling into the situation we fell into with DBZ. And it's an important question because ZICB has assumed Invest Trust, but also going back a bit further, it was born out of the failure of Intermarket Bank, essentially. So to buttress the point of how alive this risk is, when we look at the financials of ZICB, what we found out was what is driving their non-performing loans to be almost at the regulatory benchmark is the loans that they assumed from Intermarket Bank. So that already is a risk. Secondly, what's also driving their impairments? So what we mean by impairments, these are loans where the recovery, the risk, or sort of the potential to recover anything out of the asset is non-existent. So their impairments have been growing, and that's what has driven their impairments is the loans assumed from Intermarket Bank. So Invest Trust, fast forward, Invest Trust fails or is technically insolvent. Part of the assets are assumed by ZICB. So it then brings up the importance of enhanced oversight, because we run the risk of what happened with the loans that were assumed from Intermarket Bank. So that is something that the risk is very alive there, and calls for enhanced oversight and for your consideration, honourable members, as you approve this borrowing plan. Then the other question I'll try to touch on was the question by Honourable Mawumba, where we bring out the fact that the capital adequacy ratio of ZICB has reduced by almost half, from 81% in 2021 to 41%. And the capital adequacy ratio is basically a buffer for the institution to hedge against losses in terms of their assets. So in case their assets fail, in this case their loans, that their own lending, and in case these loans fail, how equipped is this institution or are these institutions ready to protect, to hedge against this, but also protect consumers, because these assets are born from customer deposits partly. So one of the reasons that has led to this, or to this reduction in this capital adequacy ratio, while it's still above the threshold, is the increase in the risk-weighted assets. So basically this ratio of capital adequacy just is a ratio between your risk-weighted assets to your capital. So when your risk-weighted assets increase, this reduces the ratio. And what causes the risk-weighted assets to increase? This is where the loans you give out, the higher the risk in terms of the more riskier the loans are, the more your risk-weighted assets go up. So that in turn, if your capital is not growing at an even bigger rate, that reduces your capital adequacy ratio. So it's also important, it also now, this point of capital adequacy ratio speaks to the risk profile of the assets of ZICB. So even as we scrutinize this borrowing, we need to look at the quality of their assets. And as they appear, these may be some of the questions we need to ask them in order for them to ensure that they have an adequate buffer against potential losses. I thank you.
Chair, we've taken the questions were loaded.
No, thank you so much. I recognize the presence of Amutike. Welcome back. And Chair, welcome back. Yeah, I think we still have some time because the other witness hasn't come. We may seem to have a lot of questions over this issue. We really want to be equipped so that we can do the correct thing. What I would want to find out from you, maybe you have another question? Let's get the one which Honorable Mumba and Honorable Kataku.
Thank you, Chairperson. I just wanted to follow what the EU support member was talking about. With what you have shared with us in terms of the challenges, because, for example, Invest Trust, you had mentioned that the boards should not be influenced to make investment decisions. And you know, I'm having difficulties setting up questions because I know exactly what I want. And I'm sure, sadly so for others, you know, 70% of Invest Trust was owned by ZCCM-IH. ZCCM-IH represents the entire wealth of our country. I have not understood why a company such as ZCCM-IH would lose a bank when that bank could have supported the mining industry by providing cheap loans, by supporting Zambian suppliers to mines. Okay? It would have played a very pivotal role in supporting government. Now, you have just given us an example that you were trying to put three banks together, which again I actually would highly support also. Because when I look at NATSEM, and I know it will be the next one to come, because they will hear that, oh, approvals are going to, I know they will be the next one, because NATSEM even benefited from Eurobonds. They don't even talk about it. Yes. But then we have not been able to redefine what the market share for NATSEM should be. When our construction industry was booming and construction was taking place all over Zambia, you find that instead of those general workers being paid through a bank such as NATSEM, you found those workers were competing with those other citizens who were earning slightly more. So you both start banking at Stanbic Bank, for example, or Zanaco Bank. Okay? But look at the cost of maintaining that account. So the cost of maintaining that account, the construction worker, whether he was getting 4,000 or 3,000, was still not good enough. He could have easily been directed to NATSEV, and NATSEV would have been naturally been growing together with the construction sector. I've put a lot of examples thought through by myself, and I wonder. So when it comes to what we're talking about,
maybe you can put up your question because the other
yes,
witness is here.
Okay. Or maybe, are we going to approve?
I don't want to preempt. List chair says I didn't do the correct thing. It is before us. If we say no, it's a no.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
I just have too many concerns. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Honorable Mkosa.
Thank you, Chair. So, for me, I would just like to go back to this issue of the foreign exchange risk. Looking at the comment that you submitted, because to start with Mr. Ngoma, right? Mr. Ngoma said we have no system of hedging on the market. And I think your submission also suggested that it's practically impossible for them to hedge. So, which means basically this recommendation then should fall. When you say the need for hedging, to hedge both monetary assets and liabilities to limit foreign exchange losses, because we ourselves where we are here, we don't know how they can hedge. So we hedging or underscoring the need to hedge, underscoring the need to hedge, then
neither here
it's
nor
neither here nor there, because it will not be done. I don't know if I am saying something that is correct, or you can make a comment. Thank you. Sorry, Chair.
Mr. Katesh, I think we needed a lot of time with you. It seems the members...
Just one little thought. And maybe just quickly, I have also not understood, Mr. Katesh. You know, let's just take the 3 budgets in the new Dawn government. 2020, okay, let's just say 2. 2022, 2023, now 2024. Huge amounts under infrastructure and housing. There is always a huge budget component, even in this one which has been announced. Why hasn't government found it easy to set up some kind of a partnership with its own bank and provided some form of financing to respond to what the acting chairperson was talking about, these pieces of land which have been advertised by developers, some form of, without necessarily these borrowings and concerns that we have. Because all the 3 budgets, I have never heard a house being constructed. A house is being constructed from CDF, which is a totally different program altogether. So I just thought...
thank you so much, Honorable Mumba. Oh, you didn't complete your thought? We'll be here until tomorrow. Yes, please.
Thank you, Chair, for your indulgence. So, for me, Mr. Katesh, for me what I was thinking was, instead of us struggling with this issue of thinking of how we can hedge, which financial instrument we can use, sometimes isn't it even better for these institutions to borrow from institutions like NAPSA? Because if NAPSA can lend a Chinese firm to do a road in Zambia, we are better off that Chinese firm bear the financial foreign exchange risk than our institutions. They are insured from such foreign exchange exposure by letting them borrow from NAPSA, workers' compensation, and other funds of that sort. I was just thinking.
And
thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. And maybe the last one will be the issue of us always, I know 8th National Development Plan and we have this deadline of 2030, but we also have to look at reality. If we are now going to fulfill the desires that were made in the 8th National Development Plan and looking at 2030 as a target, and yet we do not have the resources, we may end up going to borrow and we will end up getting messed up. I know there is a housing deficit, but definitely, do we have people who are sleeping outside right now? That would be the other question that may beg for an answer. Is it that urgent that we can get into this particular debt so that we increase already our debt? You also talked about the issue of sovereignty, the issue of saying no, sovereignty, sovereignty. And what I know is that government institutions, whether all these, they are usually vulnerable to abuse by governments. We may just be getting money that is going to be accessed by big people in government, and will end up being, we will just talk about it, but governments come and governments go. I don't know, we may need to be guided as we are going to interact with the witness. The other one is already outside. We are already taking into. Maybe that is food for thought when we come to conclude. Mr. Kateshi, you may just browse through. We may come and have a longer session with you. Thank you so much.
No, at the point of adoption of the report, I think we can still try to answer questions and suggestions that have come from Honorable Mumba, Honorable Gal. I think we can tackle them. They are very interesting thoughts and very provoking as well.
Honorable Kateshi, Mr. Kateshi, sorry. Thank you so much for appearing before the Planning and Budgeting Committee. We can only wish you a good afternoon. Thank you so much, Tim.
Enjoy the best football moments with your hashtag BFFGoTV. Get GoTV today to enjoy all the best football live on SuperSport. GoTV, love it.
You can now advertise on Parliament Television and Parliament Radio. For more information, call 0977 854102 or 0977 536487. Parliament Television, bringing Parliament closer to you.
Did you know that you can still watch your favorite shows from anywhere, anytime? Yes! Just download the StarTimes own app from Google Play or Apple Store, then register. You can link your DTT or DTH decoder to up to 3 devices by entering your smart card number and the last 6 digits of your decoder serial number. Then voila! You're good to go. You can also pay for your subscription, change your preferred bouquet and other self-services on the app. It's as easy as 1, 2, 3. Topstar. Enjoy digital life.
Good afternoon. Ernest and Young, I can see at least it's a balanced deal today. 2 ladies and 2 gentlemen. So it should have been a lady there so that we can face. All right. Thank you so much. I want to remind you that you are both live on ZN. Is it Parliament TV? And Parliament Radio. They are following these proceedings live. Starting with you, Ernest and Young, we ask you that you introduce.
For EY, we call it EY now, but I know Parliament has it on record as Ernst and Young, but it's EY. Thank you.
It's now
Madam.
EY?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
EY is still standing for Ernst and Young, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Oh, EY then.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll let my team members introduce themselves.
All right.
My name is Makosi.
Good afternoon, Anthony Mumba. Good afternoon, Anthony Mumba is my name, and a Member of Parliament for Kantanshi constituency. That's in Mufulira district on the Copper Belt.
Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. My name is Kalalwe Mkosa, Member of Parliament for Chinsali and Member of the Planning and Budgeting Committee. Thank you.
We also have a member who has joined us online. Honorable Sumushi, you can introduce yourself. Maybe network. Members of the PBO.
Yeah, it's still good. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, honorable members once more. Good afternoon, witness from Ernst & Young. My name is Mr. Fitzgerald Kateshi from the Parliamentary Budget Office.
Good afternoon, Chair, honorable members, witness. My name is Martin Phillips with the PBO.
Thank you, Martin.
Good afternoon, members. Good afternoon, our dear witnesses. My name is Isaac Ngoma. I'm from the EU Support Project to the National Assembly.
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, EY. My name is Philip Mwinga, also from the Parliament.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. My name is Francis from the Parliamentary Budget.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, my name is Sabo Peters from the Parliamentary Budget Office. Thank you, Secretariat.
Chair, good afternoon. Good afternoon, honorable members. Good afternoon, EY. My name is Elvis Chipuka from the Parliamentary Budget Office.
Thank you so much. And my name is Anyurenda Brenda, Member of Parliament for Lundazi constituency, the Vice Chairperson for this committee, standing in for my able chair there, who is just looking into some issues. It's very difficult to chair when your boss is right next. But don't worry, feel free. We are here to interact with you, and let us look at how we can take Zambia to another level. EY, I know you are very brief and very good. 20 minutes, will it be okay? 30?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, 20 minutes.
Yes.
Oh, great. It's all yours, starting from now. They need immunity.
Yes, Chair, I was about to remind you.
Cap 12, which we enjoy as members of Parliament. When we sit and make presentations, no one can take you to court for anything that you're going to say before this committee, unless you willfully choose to misinform the committee. But I don't think you'll be able to do that. You have been our partner, and we expect you to just be factual and ensure that you assist the committee come up with a good report, which we can help ourselves and our country. It's conferred on you. You are free to speak, and every one of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Chair. I know that we submitted our document last week, so Chair, I will assume and presume that the document has been read. Nevertheless, I will go through some of the key observations that we've made. So if you look at page 4, I'll start from page 4. We have the overview, and then we just summarize the borrowing terms, which I'm sure through many appearances before you, you would have heard and you would have taken note of. And then on page 5, we are looking at the alignment of the NDP and the borrowing debt management strategy together with this document that was submitted to us. So if I move on to page 5, some of the observations that the key outcomes that we expect from the debt management strategy, which informs our comments on the borrowing plan for SOEs that was presented to us. One of the key objectives is sustainable borrowing. So our comments do focus on whether the borrowing is sustainable. We look at these two entities, look at their financial capacity and metrics, Chair, and then we've made comments in terms of, can they sustain their borrowing. The debt structure and management, debt structure, one of the things that you consider, Madam Chair, is for example, the term of loans. Say if you want to build a house, Chair, you will not go and get an overdraft, you get a mortgage because of the term and nature. So one of the things that we look at is just the structure of debt. Then transparency and accountability. I commend Parliament and this committee, Chair, for part of this process is that tenet of transparency and accountability in terms of contracting of debt. I think in the past that has been a challenge, but through sittings like this, we see that there's transparency, but also a focus on productive sectors. One of the key challenges that you have with debt is oftentimes it goes into current accounts, to pay salaries and so on, rather than long-term and productive sectors for, infrastructure and other sectors that could lead to economic growth. If you look at some of the objectives of the NDP, we've set them out there. I'm on page 7, economic development, inclusivity and poverty reduction. We will deal with that in quite some detail in terms of being inclusive and poverty reduction. I'm on page 8 now, Chair. We also look at some of the objectives of infrastructure development. The NDP prioritizes infrastructure development. Then access to affordable housing. We do make some comments there in terms of the housing deficit that we all acknowledge estimated at 1.5 million. And in our view, that is still growing, and we don't think that we've made a big dent in that number, even though the objective was to reduce it in a couple of years to about 1.378 million. There's also youth and women empowerment, a key objective in terms of how we pursue our development. I'll not go into the rest of page 9. I'll also look at macroeconomic stability, which is an important objective, Chair, because you want to make sure that borrowing doesn't disrupt, first of all, our markets. I think it's been it's transversed ground. We've discussed it many times, different forums in terms of sustainability of debt, but also the impact on our market, especially with regards to, for example, domestic borrowing and the impact that it has both on interest rates and also inflation. So having given that background, Chair, I'll move on to the rest of page 10, where we look at these financial institutions that are the subject of this document in terms of their financials. We looked at a few metrics that are generally used to ascertain the financial health, especially of financial institution, but also a borrower. If somebody was about to lend money to a borrower, what would they be looking at? So in 5.1, we've looked at National Building Society. We see generally, I think all the metrics are becoming better between 2022 and 2023. So we looked at 2 years, 2022 and 2023, debt to equity ratio. This basically measures the burden of debt that a company is carrying versus the money that the shareholders have put. Return on asset, this is just looking at how much money the company is making from its asset base. Return on equity, how much money the company is making based on the money that the shareholders have invested. Then earnings before interest, depreciation, tax depreciation and amortization, which is a number we call EBITDA, a key metric also in terms of measuring the health of the company, but also how much profitability it's generating before its nominal commitments such as depreciation and so on. Then we also looked at interest coverage ratio. That too is how much from the money that this company is making, how much interest, how much would it be able to pay in interest from the profits that it's making. So for example, if you say the interest is coverage ratio is 7, it means it could pay its interest cost for that year 7 times. So if we look at the metrics for National Building Society, generally I think those metrics have been improving. Even the net interest income, for example, that also has been improving, commission and profit for the year. So the debt to equity ratio has also improved in terms of showing that it's going in the right direction. The return on assets has also improved. I'm going towards page 12. The credit worthiness has also improved. Interest coverage is also quite significant. It's healthy because it means that the company can pay 7 times a burden of. So if you increase the interest by 7 times, it will still be able to pay. Chair, please let me know if I'm going too fast, Chair. But
no.
So I think generally throughout the document we observe that ZNBS is on the right track. Their metrics are stronger comparatively, and liquidity also, customer deposits have increased, which means that the institution has more liquidity. And then the equity has also increased, so the bank has a reasonable solvency. Then we also looked at the impact in terms of the proposed borrowing on the housing market. We've mentioned the housing shortfall, but we also mentioned that beyond just borrowing, we do need to have significant other interventions beyond just borrowing. So our assessment is that National Building Society is in a position to handle the loan that is proposed. They have the financial capacity to handle it. There are caveats, obviously, and which we'll get to. One of which is, the housing market is tricky. It's not just having money. It's also, if you look at page 15 in terms of our comments there, it's also about government policy and regulation. So supportive policies, land reform. We still need to clean up our title. We recognize the land administration system, the integrated land administration system, which I think has met with a few hiccups, but it seems to be working, and it's a great step forward. But beyond that, I think we still have traditional land holding and so on. It's still very difficult for people to get title and access finance easily. Then we also look at just the innovations around affordable housing finance, PPPs, but also use of technologies. We did not want to promote a specific technology there, Chair, but we're just giving an example. I think those of us who are much older than the colleagues I came with today will remember I think we used to have Hydraform, Chair. I remember, I think somewhere around Ridge where they had their offices there a long time ago. And Hydraform literally used to use sand, compact it and make bricks. So our comments are to make sure we can encourage some of those technologies. I think we are too stuck on building technologies, which is bricks, cement, and so on, which can be expensive. These days, Chair, you can even buy a house fully made from China. It comes, you assemble it. Technologies have changed. The Chinese are building entire multi-story houses in 20 days. We see those videos. It's because technologies have changed. So we just need to encourage, maybe working with EIZ, institutions like EIZ, some of these cheaper technologies. Chair, we also have those technologies where, you can have a house completely built off-site in terms of concrete, and a crane comes and just lifts the rooms. Things like that, we're just encouraging you as a committee, but also as Parliament, to look into how we can enhance some of those technologies and reduce the costs of housing. But also, working through cooperatives elsewhere around the world, that has been tried. We haven't tried that much. The same way we have village banking, we could extend that into construction. But also, home improvement. And then also urban planning, Chair, our planning is quite a bit haphazard, unfortunately. If you go to most of these councils, you go and say, what is your plan for expansion of the city? You will not find it. Our cities just grow organically. And sometimes, Chair, I always laugh when you fly into Lusaka and you see the lights. In many other cities, when you fly into them, you see they can see the streets because they are planned. When you fly into Lusaka, it's like you scattered lights around because our cities are just not planned properly. So we're just encouraging, and that makes it expensive because somebody has to find a pole, bring it to their house, has to find a road, construct a road, and so on. So when we talk about affordable housing, Chair, we're also talking about the infrastructure that helps to make the housing affordable. Then we also did an assessment of ZNBS corporate governance. We won't go into detail there, Chair. We feel that it's sufficient. So those generally our comments on ZNBS. We will proceed to ZICB, and then, Chair, we can take questions. ZICB, I think the picture is a bit more cautious, so to speak, in terms of their metrics. Yes, a lot of their metrics are improving, but they are still on the lower end. So, for example, if you look at the debt to equity ratio, debt is significant compared to equity. If you look at the interest coverage ratio, again, it's insufficient profits to cover the interest payment. So I think the picture for ZICB is, even though the profitability has improved, but just in terms of resilience, if you add a burden of debt, we have some concerns there. Liquidity looks okay, profitability is risky, liquidity looks okay, but again, very dependent on interest, even though there's been an improvement in terms of the core income, core banking income, but I think for ZICB, generally our view there would be that the picture is a bit more concerning. In terms of corporate governance, Chair, we've looked at ZICB. I think sufficient safeguards in terms of corporate governance. Our overall assessment, if you turn to page 23, I think ZNBS probably in a better position, able to handle the challenges. ZICB improved stability, profitability, but I think the core metrics in terms of it being able to pay interest and so on are still a concern. We do note that there's an interest holiday built into some of these borrowings, but you would have to assume that, you know, even after that interest holiday, the metrics would have improved so much that they would be able to handle the borrowing. I think the rest of the comments are just generally things that we can be read in, Chair. Then we look at just some of the risks, both in terms of the packages that we are looking at. We are looking at exchange rate risk, because these are USD denominated loans. So part of the problem we see is the exposure to exchange rates. A lot of both these institutions, they own land in Kwacha. And so, you know, that asymmetry between their borrowing and their commitments to pay in interest USD based versus their Kwacha assets could create a significant problem, because some of the exposure they might not be able to transfer into the market, which also then raises liquidity risk, and also, you know, the risk from inflation. Because obviously the more inflation rises, people who borrow are under pressure and they might not be able to repay. So, Chair, I think that those would be our comments, and we will now invite questions.
Thank you so much, EY. Honorable members, you are now free to ask questions. We are satisfied. Yes, Honorable Shatira.
Thank you very much, Chair, and EY. Thank you for this detailed submission. I think you have, in fact, explained it well, so we do understand. But on your executive summary, 1.7, that is on page 3 of our document, we're just looking at your conclusion part. Okay, where you're saying the borrowing plan holds promise, but obviously requires strategic commitment and the ongoing risk management. And I'm more interested in terms of the ongoing risk management, and we are given that we have got two institutions. For the Zambia National Building Society, I think it's very clear. The path has been quite good. But the other one, Zambia Industrial Commercial Bank, even we have alluded to the fact that I think a lot of work needs to be done, and maybe so because this is a new institution. Now, in terms of given that risk profile, how would you rate it? Especially, I'm not worried about Zambia National Building Society, but this other one. When you look at risk management, the ongoing risk management, well, how should we rate it? You know, if it's those traffic lights, the one we call robots, it has got red, amber, and green. How worried should this thing should be, and especially in terms of your recommendation, because you have not come out like clear. If you were the owners of this man, maybe let me be straight. Would you recommend that Zambia National Commercial Bank should be given this kind of credit facility, knowing that if they failed, then the back is on the government, it just becomes our debt. All of us who are seated here, what would you recommend? Chair, thank you.
Let's get a question from Honorable Samoji.
Thank you, Chair. EY, as you stated, for me, I'm very concerned with the bank. We see them trying to go and borrow internationally, which will expose them to exchange rate risk. But this bank, one of the shareholders is NAPSA, who are financially stable. I was of the view that this bank should have gone to NAPSA and borrow money. Like the contractor who was doing the Osaka Ndora Road did. They borrowed it locally, hence avoiding the exchange rate risk. Why are we seeing a company formed within, which is running, operating within Zambia, failing to borrow from within, but go and borrow outside? Thank you very much.
Yes, please.
Just a quick one on Zambia Building Society. I heard you mention that there are new ways of constructing houses or indeed buildings. I'm one of those people, chairperson, when I find the construction taking place now, just looking at those blocks, I even get bored. Because I'm wondering, so much money is being put in when there are new methods of construction, much cheaper, climate friendly. So I wanted to find out, some of these companies you mentioned from China, are you able to share company names or businesses that are doing that?
EY. 35.
Thank you very much.
It says the government of the Republic of Zambia, in its pursuit of sustainable debt levels. I don't want to mention on how you can sustain debt levels by trying to be transparent, or a debt will still be a debt. If you are coming openly to say I'm owing, it's still a debt. I would want to find out. Already we are up here in terms of debt, and now you are already owing. You should go and be a surety for a particular business which also wants to, where if they default, the debt comes on your books. Are we doing the correct thing for both companies, despite the vetting here? What are we doing the correct thing?
Thank you, Chair. I'll start with the other chair's question, Honorable Jatila. The risk for Zambia ZICB, there is risk, Chair, and I think that one of the things that banks have to sustain themselves is scale. Sometimes you need just a certain critical mass, and I think that's what they are trying to solve for by borrowing, is that critical mass in terms of deposit, but also loan advances and so on. Because I think at the moment part of the struggle is that scale, obviously also the impact of the book of business, even though it's not on their books, the Invest Trust book of business, but I think there are challenges with ZICB, and obviously part of the other challenge is the history that we have with our state-owned institutions, where loan books turn bad. We are Zambians, so we can be frank with each other. Part of it is lack of governance, and I think we are glad that the document requested for comments on governance. Lack of governance around credit risk assessment, and so on. Thankfully, I think that's also helped by now in terms of accounting standards. They force you to report certain metrics, expected credit losses and so on. So unlike the situation in the past where some of these failures couldn't be assessed ahead of time, I think now we have reporting systems that help us understand that risk. But in terms of just dealing with the risk, Chair, the corporate governance will be key. How independent in terms of really examining the governance of the bank, so that even when this money comes in, the assumption is, one, they have a good business case. Obviously, we haven't seen it, so our comments are limited. Number two, they have a good framework around the governance in terms of loan exposure and lending, credit risk assessment, and so on. Those are key. Because if those are not in place, it doesn't matter how well the bank, is structured and how well the business case is. The governance failures will be important. So I think, Chair, it would be a bit difficult for us to say outrightly and say, if I was the one making this decision, I would ask for more information than I have now. Unfortunately, then I don't know how much information Parliament has, but we do due diligence. We send people in to look at the books, do a deep assessment, look at the credit portfolio and so on. That is something that we don't have before. So I'll ask, in terms of the immunity granted to us, Chair, to rightfully again say it's difficult to make that assessment and not make that call. But I think it's an important question that the Honourable Member asked, and Honourable Chair. Honourable Smunji, in terms of NAPSA, again, NAPSA is stretched, I think, in terms of, they also assessment. I'm assuming the risk assessment, I think NAPSA is also a bit stretched. As you are saying, the PPP is not cheap. We know, for example, what has happened with Society House. I think they are a bit stretched. So we should explore other sources. Also remember, Chair, generally, if you had a stable exchange rate, your offshore borrowing is generally cheaper than onshore borrowing. So generally, it's better to borrow outside. One of the things, Chair, that we've foreign exchange and so on, forex transactions, the way we tax them, that's a conversation for another day. That make it more expensive. Generally, cheaper because 7% is very high. Money available for 2%, 3%, 4%. Whereas if you offshore borrowing, the risk is quite high in Zambia. So it's not such a bad idea to not borrow from NAPSA but look elsewhere, as long as we can manage that exchange risk. Unfortunately, maybe the point of your question, Honorable, is just that natural hedging that other banks have. They borrow in dollars and they also lend in dollars. These institutions don't seem to have. So it's a bit of a mismatch. So yes, the interest rates might be lower, but they are lending in kwacha, so they are exposed, and they will have to have very rigorous financial processes to manage that risk. Because hedging also is not an option. Hedging in Zambia is very expensive. So I wouldn't even sit here and say maybe they should try hedging. It is quite expensive. The last two questions from Honorable Mumba, the new way of construction. I wish I would, can't.
Especially where he can be able to.
I think Hydraform that we already mentioned in our document, they are not a client of ours, we don't know the brief. I think they exist out there. I know, Chair will remember, a few schools were built with Hydraform around the country, and I think it was a cost effective. The Chinese also, in terms of prefabs, there are many companies, Chair.
You don't want to advertise on behalf of it, but you can meet outside, yes, so that you can be able to share some notes, I think, over that.
And then in terms of your question, Chair, around sustainability and the wisdom of borrowing more money, we will still need to borrow, Chair, because unfortunately, if we ask the state to fund these institutions, the state is constrained in terms of capacity. But you are right in saying a guarantee is just as good as borrowing by the state, because, you know, even when we record debt burden, we include guarantees. So these will be included in the state. I think the issue is if the opportunity is there and somebody can lend you money at a reasonable price, why not take it? I think that's the logic. But also, part of our comments in the document is around lending to productive sectors. I think it's really around how prudent we can be in making sure that this money is a multiply effect. Housing, I think that's a dignity issue, Chair. I think a lot of our housing is, unfortunately, we've allowed the market in our country where it's a cash-based housing system. Very few countries operate like that. So you have money, you build. If you don't have money, you will never have housing. And part of this is to change that. So the housing deficit can't be tackled merely by people spending out of their pockets. You need a credit market for housing. The ZICB case, I think that's a bit trickier because you are assuming then maybe the money is going to SMEs and credible SMEs, startups and so on to stimulate economic growth. In that respect, it's an investment. If it's not, then it becomes a challenge, and your point would be right in terms of just an additional burden, because then you're not being productive with a borrowing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. EY, I'll take you backwards. We are trying to guarantee a debt in a foreign currency so that we give it to this bank, just like we did, borrowed money, Eurobond, gave it to DBZ. Thereafter, DBZ was put in liquidation. To date, we don't know whether that money will be recovered. Please compare the contrast on this one, whether we are doing the right thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. The question that I have, if you were, say, the managing director for the two institutions, given the exposure, specifically on foreign exchange risk exposure, is this a kind of borrowing you would want approved or given to your institution, knowing very well that you cannot hedge by lending in dollar, but you are borrowing in dollar? Do you think it is a worthwhile borrowing? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. EY, on your page 11, looking at these financial metrics, you have only done, I don't know, maybe you didn't have access to the other years. You've only looked at 2022 and 2023. And all these are showing like a positive, direction. Usually, if you'd want to borrow, you are told that your books, if you have a plan to borrow, you'll be told that your books should be at least above 3.3, above what? So it's like you had already been to the person that you'd want to borrow from, and you've understood their conditions, hence you come and you put your books in order, so that when the EY goes to check and to vet, they should be able to find exactly what is obtaining, so that they can come and be able to say, yes, the Zambia National Building Society is fine. Did you look back maybe 5 years ago to try and compare with these 2 years? And would you be satisfied to say you have looked at 2022 and 2023 and you can say everything, all the indicators seem to be okay? I think I would want to really know exactly, so that when we are making decisions, you would have helped us to do that. And in addition, You talked about how a lot of countries build accommodation for its people and they can rent and later on they can own the house. Zambia had council houses throughout the country. Government policy comes in, it kicks in today. A house which was built at a very expensive price, they say no, it cannot be renovated. It is sold at a very cheap price. Chilenje, everywhere. Kajima flats, Mezaf, all that accommodation which was supposed to be homes where someone would rent and then they live, and it could be able to give the right competition to those the ones who are building estates today. Because if we had those houses, then we could be able to fight the price of accommodation elsewhere. But because of policies which come and go, you find that they give a policy direction and within 10 minutes all the houses are sold and everything is gone. I take you to SOS here. NAPSA built houses. They stayed, I don't know, 4, 5, 6, 8 years. No one was managing to buy because those houses were being sold equivalent to a particular US dollar. Hoping maybe even NAPSA, I don't know, maybe they borrowed. I don't have the records of exactly what happened. They built here in Lusaka, they also built in Kalolush. And today, those houses are gone to private hands. We do not have a system. There's no continuation. Every government comes in, it gives a different policy, and everyone takes it. That is why ZNBS, being partly controlled by government, cannot be an entity, or for me, I'd put it in inverted commas, to say you are putting your risk in a place which can easily be manipulated. I'd want your serious comment over that, EY.
Thank you, Chair. I think Honorable Smunji's question, I think I might have answered it, but it seems it's bothering the Honorable Member a lot. So I will try and answer it. I think that that's a significant risk. We've seen what happened with DBZ and so on. And I think the point is to just make sure the governance, in terms of the governance around borrowing, governance around lending, policies, risk assessment is strengthened and is strong. How robust is the credit risk committee, all those things. And also, Bank of Zambia being able to supervise without looking at who's in the loan book. And I think they're up to that, they can perform that job. So it is risky. I think it's ground that we've visited before and maybe it hasn't turned out well. But that doesn't mean we should give up, Honorable. I think we still have need for, maybe the question would be, what is the game changer here? So, what is the developmental objective? Is it, affordable credit and so on? Again, we haven't seen the presentation that they made. So there might be other reasons, is there a game changer that they are looking at in terms of affordable credit, SMEs and so on? And I think that's for this House and body to assess. That's not information that we have. Honorable Mkosa, you were asking if this is the kind of thing that if I was the MD of any of these institutions, is this something I would approve? Yes, I would, Honorable, because I think access to finance at affordable rates is a good thing. We have a constrained balance sheet as a nation. We know that the state doesn't have the cash. So yes, it's a guarantee and it will go on our book, but it depends on the terms. And there's payment holidays and so on. The interest rates are structured well. The instrument itself is structured well. Why not? The 5-year breathing space gives you, time to make use, multiply that money, have a healthy enough balance sheet to be able to sustain payments. So very few organizations have access to that kind of borrowing and funds. So I think we must be objective. This on paper looks like a good deal, obviously not ignoring the risk, the exchange risk that you mentioned and so on. That's a risk and it has to be managed. But business is about managing risk. You can't do business without any risk. And I think we have enough foresight in terms of this process to make sure that the governance processes, the risk management processes are in place so that this doesn't go wrong. On the face of it, it's a good thing. Access to credit can be difficult, especially given where we are as a nation in terms of our credit rating. Madam Chair, you asked about 2022 versus 2023. We generally, I think, unless the metrics are going wrong, generally we look at 2 years. If, for example, there's a metric that's going backwards, then we extend and see, okay, but we do it on a risk-based basis. So all the metrics we've looked at, none of them is going the other way. That would then, make us say, okay, maybe let's look backwards. The metrics are going in the right direction across all the metrics that we've looked at. So there's no red flag that would cause us to extend. So generally we think that 2 years is sufficient to form a view. And then in terms of the housing and the disposal of housing, Madam Chair, the challenge we have, I think that policy was a good policy because housing creates generational wealth. If you are following the US elections, one of the parties there is talking about a tax credit for first-time home owners and so on, because the housing creates generational wealth. One of the biggest drivers in terms of a nation driving people away from across income groups is housing, because rent can be a burden. And when people have their own housing, they have, then they can use money for other things, develop businesses and so on. How many people have failed businesses because they couldn't pay rent for their homes? So, their business, their private business failed. So once you get rid of that burden on somebody, you drive entrepreneurship, you drive more risk-taking. Somebody can quit a job and say, I want to start a business, because they are not worried about rent. So that's a good policy in itself. And I think where we failed ourselves is not driving more home ownership. We left it there. We sold houses and we stopped. And then there was very little policy in terms of driving affordable home ownership. So the NAPSA houses you are talking about, the certain income groups, they couldn't be for everybody. There's been no affordable housing policy in our country, unfortunately, since that time. I mean, some of those houses, Chair, if you go to Sakile, are two-bedroomed houses, two-roomed houses that were sold to people, odd mine houses and so on. That can't be a static process. You need to drive further investment and further ownership. So housing, in terms of us developing as a nation, Chair, it's a key process. If Parliament and you yourselves haven't looked at it in that frame, you need to look at it and say housing creates generational wealth, and housing is part of driving people across income groups. Low income to higher income, housing is a key part of that process. Thank you, Chair.
Anyway, thank you so much. The major challenge that you talked about, the issue of planning, is that most of the companies, or where you can find employment, it is in the CBD. I'm giving an example of Lusaka. It is here. You'll find that the nearest land someone will be able to get is in Chinyunyu or in Rufunza. Are those projects going to be viable? Would they be, viable? Would people wish to go and live 80 kilometers or 200 kilometers, then come and get a job here? With this chaotic transport system, we don't have tubes, trains, we don't have cheaper buses. then we are investing into, housing units, and knowing very well the way it is right now. Unless maybe building society had kept some land somewhere within maybe 10-15 kilometers, but you definitely be talking about going 100 kilometers away. We can only wish ourselves well, and thank you so much for appearing before this committee.
Thank you.
12
It's been our privilege.
we shared with you. We withdraw it now so that you can move freely. But I would have loved Madam Nyirenda to greet me again and the other lady, so that at least and they didn't say anything. No, come on. I wanted the greeting I'm looking for is for her to make a comment. Yeah, how can she just come and go? Make a comment, Madam Nyirenda and the other lady.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I'll talk on the housing, creating generational wealth. I will speak on behalf of my generation because we are the future, and we obviously look to drive and see this country in a better place. We have been exposed to such meetings, and we obviously take this knowledge and try and make things better. A lot of people our ages are leaning towards running their own businesses as opposed to being in employment. So if you look at how expensive housing is, it's a thing of I need to make sure that I'm able to pay for my housing, but also take a lot of risks with businesses. And business is not a thing where you are guaranteed every month it's going to be a good month. So that is going to lift a huge burden from people, and I've seen people travel from far places. People come from 15 miles to work in Lusaka because it's their house. They're happy it's theirs. So if Rufunsa is quite far and Rufunsa is big, but if it's yours, I think people make a lot of sacrifices so that it stays in the family. Your children will have it. It will be easier for them, and they don't have to start from a rough place. That's my submission.
Thank you so much, Madam.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. Madam Chair.
Yeah.
So my comment is just a build upon what you said. Just to say it's quite far, and I think once the buildings are there, businesses would want to move there in order to push economic activities in there. If you take an example of how Nigeria moved their capital city to Lagos, there was nothing in Lagos. Once they moved there, all businesses moved to that side. So once the buildings are there, people are moving there, businesses will definitely move there, and the jobs will be closer. We can even look at 10 miles. It's not the same as it used to be. As well as Lusaka West, it was a bush, but now businesses are moving there because they are housing there. So the more houses there, more businesses will mushroom, and more economic activities will be in that area. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Natasha. We may need to start going up instead of Bangalore, because I was just in China and I was on the 43rd floor, but just within town. So our planning system may need also to improve so that we can be able. Thank you so much for your time. We hope to see you soonest than later. God bless you.